Hi everyone, Adam here with a quick note. You may have noticed that this episode is 2 days late going up, and if you don't follow us on Twitter or Patreon, you might not know why. The answer is that I was out of town for a family funeral, so I'm getting this up as soon as I was able to, and I don't think anyone is all that mad about it, but I can be weird and neurotic sometimes, so I wanted to put an explanation and an apology up front anyway. I hope you find our efforts to be worth the brief wait. Hello and welcome to Dice Punks, a tabletop role-playing podcast where we focus on playing full campaigns in less well-known systems. This week in episode 39, our nobilists fraternize with friends and enemies on their quest for a kind of divine labor organizing. Hello and welcome. I'm Adam, your friendly neighborhood game master, and joining me are...
Hi, I'm Drew, and I'll be playing Leorian Cathar, Viscount of Tempo, Kinetic Ludist, Ballistic Lurist.
Hi, I'm Robin, and I'll be playing the Malevolent Mavia, Furious Queen, Baronet of Darkness, and the lovely Lissa, Servant to the Forge. I'm just seeing how long I can take introducing my character.
And I'm Romnet.
I love the idea that Robin will accrete titles like some sort of Plantagenet royalty while Romnet keeps getting shorter and shorter.
I was going to offer up some manner of thing about, like, being in charge of murder, but, like, trying to not see every problem as a nail.
We'll see how that goes, I suppose. But thank you. Couple of things. Hopefully you are noticing an increase in the overall audio quality, particularly on Dez's track. I bring this up because I want to thank our patrons. They have bought some new equipment for us, and we're hoping that it makes a difference. So thank you to all of our patrons on Patreon. If you are interested in checking out what we've got, that is patreon.com/dicepunks. There are a couple of tiers. You can get access to a patrons-only Discord, as well as our Dice Peaks after show. We put the episode 0 Dice Peaks up in the public feed so you could see what kind of thing it was. But we have Dice Peaks for all the episodes. If you want to come and check them out, that's on our Patreon. If you don't want to, that's fine too. But we wanted to just kind of put it out there, and especially to thank our patrons for buying us equipment so that
thank you very specifically. This will not only allow me to sound better, but also annoy Adam less with the incessant clicking.
It's all good. This is what the Patreon is for making everything slowly better over time. So just wanted to throw that thanks out there, do a little bit of a pitch. First off, we have Romnet's XP roll for Mortal XP.
God, where are my dice? It's been a hot sec.
Blow the cobwebs off those.
No, actually, before my birthday, my roommates got me a dice tray for my desk.
Oh, that is beautiful.
Handsome.
That is this lovely, like,
a scaly
cast
cat
dragon curled up upon itself around the area where you put the dice.
Yeah, listeners could not see that, but if we think about it later on, I'll try to maybe tweet it from the Dice Punks Twitter if we have an image of it, because it is kingly.
'Tis.
Very much so.
It is super cute.
I do love those cats that breathe fire.
Indeed.
Pretty cool cat. Indeed. Among my favorite kinds of cat, yeah.
They're a bit destructive to keep, though.
That's right.
Not quite. And very difficult to letter train in my experience.
3 10s.
All right, well, I dare say that gets you your mortal experience point.
Yes. Yes, it does.
I suppose we'll have this one glow with a limning of silver light, as is only appropriate. Otherwise, do we have any character stat growth coming up?
Yes.
Do tell.
Okay, so I have 2 divine experience points, and so I only need 1 point to raise a secondary domain by a point or level, but I can't raise it higher than my primary domain.
Correct.
So can I split those two and put one on darkness to raise it to 2 and make lesser divinations accessible to my character? And then one on the forge. Because
Perfect.
Lissa would be upset otherwise.
Absolutely you can. Which takes you to, I believe, Viscountess in darkness for Mavia and Baron or Baroness in Forge for Lissa. Excellent. Anything else character growth wise from anybody?
Nothing from me this week.
I think at this point I'm actually going to be saving up for Sense.
Oh, excellent.
Just because Sense 5 seems like a hell of a milestone.
Absolutely.
And 7 plus a master die in sorcery is never a bad thing, for all that I don't do it very much.
That said, when you have done it, it seems to have been relatively useful.
Absolutely.
And certainly significant in terms of narrative and character. No, that sounds good to me. You can save up. And for our listeners, 6 is the cap for mortal skills and stats, which means that you can have a maximum of a dice pool of 12 for any given roll, but you can only ever roll 10 at a time. So going above 5 plus 5 or 6 plus 4, I suppose, is a hedge against penalties and sabotage. To be just like the absolute best that you can be there. The upper echelons of the Rain and One Roll Engine's power curve is really interesting in that way. Just thought I'd give us a little mechanical corner. So if we're done with XP expenditure, I believe that it is time for Leorian to offer us a recap of last time.
More than happy to. So, Asha had been freed from the wrathful and litigious Timothys, and Lissa and Romnet were escorting him home when I, with perfect timing, very naturally, entered a big spooky house that opened its doors to me. It was full of oil lamps, continued to be spookier. I made my way upstairs, which was, to my decreasing surprise, also entirely full of lamps. I snuffed them out miraculously, and the house, it seems, did not like that. It made me feel afraid in a way that I did not enjoy, and then made it clear that it meant to kill me in a way that I most certainly would not enjoy. So I made for a window, blew it out by use of my lure, and fell and died. Actually, I survived, unfortunately, although not in a dignified fashion, and Lissa, who of course saw the whole thing, making me wish once again that I had died, sucked the fury out of the house, and that was that. Off we then went to a forge where she fashioned fascettes out of bloodstone and added them to Electo. We made our way out then of Fermata through the gates, only to find that the Light Word were encamped just outside. Remulus was there, and this brought Mavia back to the fore. Kea embraced Mavia, and Mavia returned the embrace. Thad was also there. We suggested to Remulus that we, all of us, might organize, form a sort of guild, a joining, a partnership. We'll find a word for it later. And last of all, it turned out... Yeah, I don't know. It'll come to me. It turned out last of all that Varric had taken on the role of alemaker, locally somewhat to Lissa's chagrin and contrary to her instructions, but we found ourselves able to settle in this makeshift community at the edge of all sorts of things.
Perfect and wonderful. 2 minor clarifications there. It was Mavia who sucked the fury out of the house.
Good call.
And when Lissa was working with the Bloodstone, adding to Electo and crafting the triplet of flechettes were separate projects. The claw / spike to Electo was one thing, and then the leftover Bloodstone became flechettes that she could throw.
I appreciate that clarification, because I was for sure picturing a sort of omni-weapon, but yes, that makes way more sense than what I was picturing. So, and my deepest apologies to my Furious Queen for diminishing her role in the proceedings.
No worries. I was too hung up on the fact that your recap implied that there were types of fear and being killed that you would find enjoyable.
I can only assume you've not met many musicians.
Little death,
Yeah, there you go.
Oh man. Yeah, no, just I appreciate the liveliness and efficiency of your recaps.
What I lack in
they were
accuracy, I
just-
make up for in those, I think.
yeah, a couple of quick sort of specifications there. So that brings us to where we are rejoining the action here. What had been the inn in the little 4-gate town outside of this particular gate of Semerin, back before it was Fermata, was sort of hermit crabbed into, like much of the rest of the village, by the Lightward, and you have been led there to sort of take your rest, as it were, and sample, as they said, their limited hospitality. They are still very much setting up shop, in this area, but Kea and Thad are really eager to show it to you. Kea still riding sort of tire swing style. I assume horizontal tire swing, not vertical tire swing, in Mavia's tendrils. Remulus sort of looking over the whole proceedings from his whirlwindy self outside. And the inside of this inn is a little ramshackle, a little bit worse for wear, but they've started to clean it up. They've started to repair things. It doesn't have a lot, but it does have places to sit. It has tables, it has a bar, and it has the very beginnings of Varric's brewing,
That
projects
sounds dubious.
here. Dubious is a good word for it, actually. Varric himself is not behind the bar, but rather sort of in the little kitchen area behind the bar, though that is visible here, as this is a relatively basic building, nothing as fancy as what you could find in Fermata, a little bit rustic in some ways.
Obsidian?
Certainly less obsidian. This is almost entirely a type of cypress. The construction, both the building and the furniture. I
like the implication one can attribute to that obsidian is a type of tree.
Trees are the other carcinization of the natural world. On a long enough timeline, everything will either evolve
Trees
into a
and
tree or
crabs.
crab.
I was going to say that inside Fermata, it is not clear how much obsidian would qualify as a type of tree. Outside of Fermata, it is much more clear-cut, which may be a relief. But yes, this is mostly cypress wood with some accents of other types of wood and some stone, not obsidian in any case. Varric looks up to see, everybody enter. Remulus having asked for some time to sort of ponder your offer of a sort of nobles union and the destruction of what you have come to call the throne. So yeah, Thad enters, pointing out like, oh yeah, like the chairs are over here. This is the bar. We've already cleaned everything up, and Varric's back here making some. He's just kind of giving you the tour, as unnecessary as it is. Kea, for her part, is more or less quiet, just kind of like reclining amid Mavia's tendrils.
Has Varric seen Mavia yet?
No, it's not clear what he's doing in the kitchen, but he seems to be looking through something. He has not noticed anything. It should be said, even outside of Fermata, his mossy aspect persists. This is true of those of the Lightward who sort of found their fear of the dark late enough to change. All of the changes have persisted, even having left Fermata.
This is a very strange question, but he's still recognizable as Varric to me, I assume.
Oh, for sure. In as much as Mavia can recognize Varric, I don't know exactly where on the timeline of Lissa's biography the current Mavia sort of like is focused. It's kind of up to you, I suppose, how much then that Mavia would recognize Varric or have any particular associations with him.
Yeah, my step definitely hitches and my head tilts. My tentacles probably stutter a bit where Kaya's lounging, but not so much that I drop her, just like kind of a recoil briefly.
Sure. She reflexively throws her arms around your ribs to steady herself.
Mm-hmm. I walk to the doorway of the kitchen area where he is and just observe quietly for a moment.
Romnet, Leorian, any particular preferences in your action here?
Trying to be the one not noticed. Not like hiding, because again, that's obvious, but just sort of, I'm a dude in a bar.
Sure.
Pay no attention to me.
I would still love you to roll coordination plus stealth, 3 plus a master die. I know you're not trying to hide, but I think that still covers being unobtrusive.
Still stealth.
Yeah, that's stealth.
Exactly.
That's the form of stealth some of our listeners may be the most familiar with, if anything.
Pair of 5s.
All right, good deal. Yeah, you just kind of, fade into the background a little bit. It's not crowded, so there is a limit to the effectiveness of this, but certainly people will look at Leorian and Mavia before they will look at you. Probably Thad, too, honestly.
I do precisely the opposite of what Romnet is doing. Where is the party in this room, and how can I become it?
Well, there is something of
This is why we can be friends, Leorian.
There is something of an absence of party here. There are other people among the Lightward in here, but only about a half a dozen and at like 3 tables. So it's relatively quiet. There isn't that much to eat or drink here yet. They're still getting set up. So it's fairly subdued. This is just a place where you can kind of sit down, take a weight off without like going to bed.
All right. I think
it is a 2.5 place.
Indeed. I think my first move then is to acquire some manner of beverage.
All right. So I would assume then that you approach the bar and maybe either
unless there's someone who has too many drinks and I can steal one. Yeah, the bar probably makes more sense.
Yeah, nobody is quite that flush. They don't have quite that much to drink here just yet.
Sure. Yeah, toward the bar it is then.
Sure, you head toward the bar and maybe kind of like rap on it.
Yeah, indeed.
And Varric turns around, sees you, and then immediately sees Mavia and goes, "Oh, lass! You're looking, a little younger. How are you, lass?"
I am well. And I tilt my head at him again, like I'm trying to place something, but I'm not quite sure what.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're well. I feel I should explain. I felt bad, but I didn't quite make it to Therret. I felt the Lightward needed me here, a little bit. It's they're doing something hard here, setting up a little bit of a community, and they could use some of my expertise. But I rest assured, I will head to Therret when I feel they're settled a little more, and I'll see if that can come with me.
I imagine that based on his reaction, my shadows had been a little settled already, but I still kind of shrug them off around my face a little bit more.
Yeah, I think we had established last time that your shadows were less chaotic post, sort of, I guess you could call it ennoblement of Mavia, as well as the sort of, not exactly a change, let's say revelation undertaken in the Godswoods, but certainly you can do more to kind of like smooth them out a little bit here, he seems to have a little bit of that Formotan thing going on where they don't always perceive Lissa and Mavia as separate.
I, by the way, am approaching the bar and awestruck that anyone has called the Furious Queen lass. so I am just gawking
you
currently.
Met Varric yet? Oh, that's right.
Yeah, for what it's worth, Leorian, you are beholding this, sort of border between middle age and twilight years kind of fellow with moss for a beard. He cuts quite a figure. Yeah,
memorable. If I'd met him, I'd remember.
Yeah. What appears to be happening is that he is bottling some cider from a barrel. So that may be what you end up drinking. But his attention is wholly on Mavia currently. The apology having been given, he seems to be waiting with some trepidation to see what the response is.
I raise one shoulder and drop it in a half approximation of a shrug, and instead intone, "You were the one I was protecting when I awoke."
He cocks his head a little bit, seemingly confused. Awoke? Oh. And then he rocks back as though he has been punched between the eyes. And his eyes go a little unfocused. And he sort of slides slowly to his knees and then to a sitting position on the floor, his eyes unfocused, without saying anything.
I impulsively send out a couple of tendrils to try to keep him upright.
Okay. Yeah, you send out a couple of tendrils and they sort of support him, and he lulls in your grasp for a moment and then sort of straightens and shakes his head. And he goes, oh, lass, I'm so sorry. But you have to know, I'm touched. It was... His eyes go unfocused for a second again, and you can see them well up with tears. And he says, it was terrible. But it was also... It struck awe into me. And I would never hold it against you. Had I had the power, I'd have done the same thing. And he sort of reaches up and rests a hand on one of the tendrils supporting him. And now he's full on crying. And he sort of stammers and speaks in a little bit of gibberish for a moment, trying to decide what he wants to say. And then he says, I'm just so sorry. You shouldn't have had to do that on my behalf.
I wordlessly move towards him, probably leaving Kea behind, and kneel in front of him and say, I was so fresh. I didn't mean to go that far.
He nods. He says, I understand. From the moment I took you in, I knew you had plenty to be furious about. I hoped that between the two of us we could channel it to something useful. But to understand. I wish it had been otherwise. But it's not your fault. And I'd have done the same in your shoes. And he squeezes the tendril in kind of a reassuring way and keeps eye contact with you while he says it, while he continues to cry.
At this point, Maeve is also crying. And I pull him tight in a hug, still on my knees, still keeping my body language intentionally smaller than his own.
Mm-hmm. He tentatively sort of reaches out with his other hand that's not on your tendril and sort of... I mean, I always picture Mavia with sort of like an indeterminate, almost JoJo's Bizarre Adventure-esque, like, blending of hair and shadow on top of her head.
Medusa-esque.
Yeah, and he just sort of smooths whatever's there back and just says, I'm sorry, lass. I'm sorry. And then just kind of like rests his hands on the tendril and on your head respectively and sort of closes his eyes for a moment.
She kept me locked away, repressed for so long, except for when she couldn't help it. I just wanted to help. That's all I've ever wanted. I didn't want anyone else to swallow their fury the way I had my whole life.
I know, lass. I know. And he sort of like, doesn't like push away, but like sort of extends to arm length so that you can like look at each other. And he says, I'll be honest. There's been destruction, there's been loss, but I think you've been good for her. And I think you can be good for each other. I don't know if I'm making any sense. I'm just an old man, but I saw something in you. And I think you've shown that I was right. You kept so much contained. It's not healthy. And it's only because a supernatural meddling that it ever got so dire. I think he swallows, just, I don't know if it came through on the microphone, but I tried to do it. And he sort of puts one hand on sort of either side of your face, sort of lightly resting them on your cheekbones, and says, as long as you're learning from it, we can chalk it up as misfortune, and you don't need to dwell. Neither of you do, if that makes sense. You can only make, well, cards. You can only play the hand you're dealt. And if it hadn't been for all of this, and he just gestures broadly at the world, I don't think it'd have been so dire. He gives you sort of a meaningful look and seems to run out of words.
Your forgiveness means much.
He nods,
but
sadly.
How can I forgive myself?
I don't think I can answer that, but do you need to? He sort of shrugs and says, I'm not that wise, lass. I'm really not. I've lived until recently in a very narrow kind of way. Haven't had to think of too much outside of my smithy. But maybe you don't have to forgive anything. Maybe you can just... You can accept that something was bad, but realize that you can't change it and move on.
You're as right as ever.
It's just the smithy. If you're falling a piece of metalwork, and you just gotta do what you can with it, right?
Yeah, I can. You taught me that I can solder just about anything back together.
It'll never be as whole as it was, but there's nothing you could do about it at a certain point, right?
And there's some beauty in the cracks.
You always were better at putting my thoughts into order than I was. Look, lass, I ain't good at this sort of thing very much, so... Well, you have some cider. I made it myself. It's not all the way done yet, but we gotta have something to drink, right?
Yes, You've always wanted to do something like this yourself, so yes, I will have a a dram of your cider. Make it a double, actually.
Why, someone your size always needed a little bit more. And your friends. And he gestures to where Leorian is at the bar and presumably is including Romnet in this, although he doesn't look or gesture directly at you.
Leorian looks away guiltily because he's had his face in his hand and he's been looking through the cracks in what he thinks is a very surreptitious way.
Yay.
Being unsubtle in a way that Romnet is not.
Well, you know, as we like to say, subtlety is for cowards.
Yes, well, this is somewhat accurate of Romnet.
Much to unpack, yeah.
So he sort of wipes his face with his sleeve a little bit and pats both of Mavia's shoulders. And then rummages in a cabinet for some clayware mugs that they presumably either found here or brought from Fermata, and just scoops into the barrel and goes, well, it's just closer to apple juice a little, but yeah, well, we drink what we can, and the taste is fine. It just won't, you know, doesn't have that much alcohol in it yet. And he hands a mug to Lissa and then walks over to the bar to put one in front of Leorian and then sort of glances at Romnet and says, will you be wanting some cider, Prophet?
That would be lovely, thank you.
Aye, happy to. He gets you a mug and gets himself a mug. Sets your mug on the bar and sort of raises his and says, to the lass, and looks fondly at Mavia.
It's you, the lass.
Kea, without a drink, sidles back up to Mavia and says, to the lass.
To our friend.
Thad is standing by the door and goes, Could I maybe get some cider, Mr. Varric? And Varric takes a pull of his cider and goes, aye, of course, lad. And goes and gets Thad some cider.
As he's getting this other drink, I kind of stab my head towards Leorian. Not intimidatingly, that's just the only way I know how to move around with thinly reined in aggression.
Sure.
But I lean in and say, this is Varric. He is essentially my dad.
Oh, well, a pleasure and an honor to meet him, then. I didn't mean to intrude on that moment, nor this one for that matter. To him, to you.
I hoist my glass and say to Varric before taking a taste.
Yeah, he's coming back at that time and goes, no need for that, lass, but he looks pleased. After you lower your glass, Kea sort of reaches for it and goes, may I have some, milady?
I let her take it.
She takes a little sip, and it would be an overstatement to say that she bats her eyes at you, but she sort of looks up at you in a fond way.
The corner of my mouth quirks upwards. And it's an expression that doesn't quite fully look like my own.
Sure.
But somehow still is.
Thad sidles over to the bar next to Romnet and just sort of like bobs his head like this is all exactly the vibe that he's looking for. So
for my sins, Adam.
So, you guys have arrived, if I remember correctly from last episode, in town around like late morning. It's probably around lunchtime now. I'll rule that Varric can break out some just basic vittles for you. But you have an afternoon, an evening, a night, and the beginning of a morning, you know, that Remulus has offered you. I want to sort of see if we can't time-lapse that a little bit I mean, if you want to do anything in particular, or if you want to try to leave before then, that's all good and well. But we probably don't need to do it like beat for beat. So, broad strokes, what are we generally doing with our time? Let's start with Romnet.
Point of order question, Adam.
Sure.
Was Thad starting to flirt with me?
Interesting. You know what? I'm actually going to roll. I'm going to give Thad a roll to see if he was sufficiently intimidated by Mavia to break his tunnel vision on Lissa.
Much depends on this roll.
Please, rather literally.
I live to serve, milady.
I'm going to roll yes. He was sort of timidly for him, which may be sort of like middle of the road for any other person, starting to flirt with you.
Let the listener be aware that Robin is doing an end zone dance.
Tis true.
Tis true.
What would I roll, Adam?
Yes.
To flirt with him in a way that doesn't actually promise any sort of action while we are here this time.
Well,
would it just be charm and fascinate in my master die?
I feel like it's charm and fascinate.
Excellent.
And frankly, your charm plus fascinate is 4 plus a master die. I am tempted to give you a bonus die because that is easy. So you can roll 5 plus a master die.
Well, that is 3 9s becomes 4 9s.
Fish in a barrel.
Yeah, no, you have his undivided attention as long as you want it.
This is more going to be playful than anything
certainly.
This is sport flirting and also doing Mavia a favor.
And for what it's worth, he's totally down, right? He doesn't seem like he is fawning or desperate or trying to take more than you're willing to give. He appreciates the attention and understands the vibe. For all that he is a little clueless to Lissa's sort of disdain for him,
the disdain is mostly out of character. Disinterest is Lissa.
That. Yeah, okay, that's a better word. Thank you for supplying it. Yeah, for all that he is a little bit oblivious to Lissa's disinterest in him, it's not like he doesn't ever flirt or just do sort of, casual kind of, what am I talking about? Romantic overtures,
of course,
toward people. And, you get the feeling that previously he was a little intimidated by your stature as prophet, but encountering you in a new context alongside Mavia and Leorian, he's a little more receptive and he's having fun and you're having fun. And you don't feel like there's a mismatch there.
Also, it's kind of entertaining how, like, he might have been intimidated given my reputation prior to Dosk.
Right. A good point. All right, so that's Romnet. Anything in particular that our other two are getting up to?
I lavish Varric with heaps of praise. I tell him that it's an honor, a pleasure, and this cider, I would not believe that it was not complete. So flavorsome and so libacious is the libation.
Now, how much are you embellishing here?
Extravagantly.
Cool. I'd like a charm plus lie.
Sure.
2 dice.
I think we've established the cider is merely okay. So, I mean, I am lying. Okay. So 2 dice it is. Leorian, not the best liar. Here we go.
Great performer. Not great lying.
Shockingly, no matches. High 6.
So I'm floored.
Varric looks a little bit sort of contemplative and distant, but he seems to appreciate your efforts.
Sure. And we've learned a valuable lesson about Varric keeping it real.
Mavia, anything in particular you're doing with your evening?
On one hand, I am definitely going to bring Varric to speed with regards to the entire situation of Raymulus. PG, obviously, Not
Well,
leaving
yeah.
out my previous entanglement question mark, but really stressing the fact that there is a slight vulnerable situation occurring where at some point in time, Raymelis's Imperador could order an attack on Fermata, and all those bells and whistles and what that looks like.
Right. The evening passes, the afternoon passes, and then the evening passes, and relative... yes?
I had one more thing that maybe I was going to take care of.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Is there any point at which Mavia and Leorian would be mostly alone-ish?
Yeah, we can arrange one. There's plenty of time, sure.
Okay. I imagine that we're still drinking cider throughout the evening, as we do.
Probably.
I also imagine that I am not one for beating around the bush, so at some point, apropos of nothing during the evening, maybe I'm gonna lean over to Leorian and be like, so, about your friend, Aldry.
I look at you glassy-eyed. I don't recognize what we're talking about for a moment until I extremely do. Yeah. Yeah, about him. We spoke of this once before, albeit under different circumstances, and I guess I wasn't ready to talk about it. What about him?
I fear he must have been within my radius.
Within your... Ah.
And I am sorry.
I don't know if I ever said it, but in Calavan, when Aldry was killed, it was Kelio. It was his own brother, our dancer, who killed him. He did it with his bare hands. And then he looked back at me, daring me to stop him, though it was too late to stop him. Perhaps simply daring me to see, or daring me not to see. Kelio has no memory of it, and none of the others seem to know, and I've never been able to tell him. And that was because of this inane war of gods, then. I thank you for the apology. I get up and walk outside. I'm not totally sure where I'm going.
It's twilight when you head out, and there isn't very much in the way of places to go. It's pretty much a main thoroughfare that is sometimes land and sometimes planking, leading to what you assume will be a ferry stop somewhere along the river.
I just sort of keep walking, and I look at the broken drum, which I carry with me at all times, which belonged to Aldry.
Yeah.
And, no, yeah.
I was going to say, you eventually, in contemplation, come to where there would have been, there's a pier where there would have been a ferry, stopping to take people up and down the river, mostly up the river from here. And you can go no further. By that time, it's full night. And very dark under the canopy of trees.
Without necessarily thinking it through, I call out to Dusk. I say, did you know this? I'm not sure whether I expect a reply, but if I don't get for one, I would wait a fairly long time to get one.
Sure. No. Roll Sense plus Eerie, 6 dice.
Will do. That is 2 9s.
2 9s.
Nice.
You get something of Somewhat inappropriately for the mood of the moment, I am tempted to say like a force ghost of Dosk in front of you.
Does the ghost at any time get tired and sit on a log? Because if so,
No. This image, this apparition of Dosk, is a little sketchy, not as detailed as the sort of blue filtered
Sure.
film force ghosts that we're used to, and is just standing about a foot above the surface of the water of one of the channels that the Saru River carves on its way to the ocean through this area, and regarding you somewhat mournfully while you sort of call out.
Is everything pitiable? Everything regrettable because of this rivalry of forces? God.
Dosk sort of hangs his head and shakes it and goes, I didn't know anything specific when I ennobled you. I just could feel that you were right for it. But it's probably fair to say that there is very little that hasn't been touched in recent years by this Titanomachia.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's it, right? The regular people, they just absorb the blast, whatever it is we do. And now we can rise above that, right? We can end that. Right?
He shrugs one shoulder and slowly raises his head to look at you directly and says, I hope so. I've only been a god for a little while, so I don't know what those who have done this for eons feel like, but I can still remember being mortal. I can put myself in their shoes. It takes a little effort now, the longer that I'm disembodied. But, I can still get there. Some of them were never mortal, though, and I think it shows.
I think it shows. All right. All right. All right. The Furious Queen, I mean, she's a storm, and I knew that the rain fell on the just and the unjust alike at times. I think I just didn't realize how close I'd been to the result. And would you blame a specific rain cloud for the flood that drowned your friend? That'd be foolish.
Dusk nods sadly and says, we play the hands we're dealt, I guess, and well, I hope to end this. It won't end in justice, but can end this kind of injustice because Mavia is also a victim here, not just of the Gods' War, but of crummy people, from what I can tell.
Yeah. Of course.
But, this game of pass it on with pain, I can't stop it myself, but I can at least, hopefully, I can plug up a particular vector,
Yeah. It's just a larger scale version, really, of, I mean, the most heroic thing a mortal can do, I've always thought, is not pass along whatever pain they've been handed. Just refuse. Just have it stop with you. We have more power, and so we need to do more of that. I should go talk to her. Thank you. My most exalted nothing. Dosk. Thank you.
Yeah,
it means a lot.
Yeah, the titles don't matter. It just, and the apparition sort of strides forward a foot above the water and lays a hand on your shoulder and says, I'm not going to lie to you. I have no idea what I'm doing now. I definitely didn't when I was first ennobled. But I don't think it was a mistake that you're my nobilis.
Yeah, I don't either.
So, I'll try not to screw up too bad. You try not to screw up too bad, and hopefully we'll see it through, right?
That's the most honest and comprehensive philosophy I've ever heard.
Well said.
Okay.
Ah, crap. Apparition fades.
I take that as a sign and I stride back.
Anything you've been doing in the meanwhile, Mavia?
Sitting at the bar.
Varric has been diligently keeping your clay mug full without saying much. It occurs to you that he was probably always going to be a pretty good bartender given the chance.
Oh, absolutely. There is a lack of surprise at his newfound profession, because he has always struck me as someone who is multi-passioned.
After an interval, Leorian, you return to the inn in construction, so to speak. Is there anything else either of you wish to accomplish before you turn in for the evening?
I sit back down with Mavia and make sure we both have a full cup, and I say, thank you, and I think I can forgive you as long as we can plug this one up, if we can leave this very strange world better than we found it, then the rest hardly matters.
I think I can get behind that. Though, to be fair, to my understanding, I am just theory distilled. I'm working on being better and trying to help, but I am the feeling, the overwhelmingness of it, the trauma. And I let Lissa take control again.
Yeah, the shadow tendrils just sort of, one moment they're sort of undulating, and then the undulation becomes a fading and a dissipating, and then there's Lissa sitting there.
Oh, she told you, and I'm sure it was, well, I'm sure I didn't say it with a lot of grace. I'm sorry. I'm bad at dealing with anything but, delightful things, and that was anything
less than. When you see her, if it works that way, she said she's just fury distilled. I want her to know she's not just anything. None of us are. Nobody's just their pain. Nobody's just what they've been through. She's playing the hand she's dealt, like anybody is.
Well, I thank you, and could I have a hug?
Oh. Absolutely. I oblige. Enthusiastic.
I probably left Leorian slightly off of his feet.
Of course.
I would hope so, yeah.
Bear hug. Full on bear hug.
Perfect. I want to...
The love is stored in the squeezing.
I marked out to say this. I love everything that just happened because I've literally said exactly, I don't think you're just anything before, like in perfect earnest, like in a vulnerable moment. You guys are awesome. I'm going to mark her back in. So, eventually, the cider runs out. The evening wanes. Presumably everybody turns in. It is a fairly uneventful night. And you wake in the morning just rested, refreshed, nothing in particular. but you can, once you're awake, hear the wind howling outside. Romulus is still present. It reminds you of everything that's going on. And Romulus is not coming indoors or anything, but once everyone is awake and outside, he'll take the opportunity to speak to you. Is there anything that anybody wants to accomplish in the morning before that? No is an okay answer. All right.
I not for the first time and probably not for the last time. I take a little extra time to arrange myself because I've probably been crying a little.
Mhm.
Mostly happy tears.
Sure.
It probably takes me a little longer too for similar reasons, and there's a added furtiveness with how I address everyone the next morning.
Certainly.
And Romnet is studiously going, yes. People dealt with emotional things. Cool.
I guess I should probably also just kind of catch us up here. Thad was pretty well diverted with Romnet last night. Kea eventually sort of gave, by bedtime, it was Alyssa sort of a hug and a peck on the cheek and gave you your space. With a very fond sort of good night, and has not made herself evident this morning. So by the time everybody is sort of assembled in the common room and heading out, everyone has more or less collected themselves. Lissa is in the driver's seat, so to speak. And, you exit the inn. Overall, given that they've only been here a little while, the hospitality was excellent, though it was a little closer to camping than you would expect from, a more established settlement. Once you are clear of the inn, you get, sort of the whirling of the wind, and Romulus addresses the company and says, I hope you have enjoyed the hospitality that the Lightward can offer under my auspices. I have done my best to help them establish themselves here, but I know they can have so much more potential. It is about this point that he seems to realize that Mavia went into the inn and Lissa has come out of the inn. And he says, I have hoped to be able to greet this aspect of you, Furious Queen.
Hi. It's nice to meet you a bit more directly. So I think you'll find we're just two sides of the same coin.
You've taken the words right out of my mind. You are as glorious either way, and I welcome you once again to our little community. In any case, I wish to let you know that I have considered the possibilities, and I believe my most productive course of action is to await the formation of an official, how would you say it, sort of alliance. I can remain as I am until there is momentum that I can throw myself behind, that alerting my imperator to what might be brewing in terms of the plans of the nobles. Does this sound agreeable to you?
It sounds most generous. And if anyone could throw themselves into momentum gracefully, it would be you.
I am glad we see. Well, I don't exactly have eyes, but eye to eye in a way. I will stay here. I will look after the Lightward, and I will await a signal. Though do know that if you take too long, it is entirely possible that Dagon will dispatch me on the offensive. Hopefully, this will not put too much of a hitch in your plans should it take place.
How should we contact you once we obtain that momentum and What degree of momentum are you hoping for?
Well, if you can have a coalition of nobilis that could, together, potentially overpower a single imperator, I believe that should be enough to, at the very least, intimidate mine. Exactly what threshold that represents, well, it is guesswork, is it not?
I think
As for contacting me, you must only undertake a voyage and then reach out.
I think both are manageable. We may even have an Imperator as an ally.
Most excellent. I await your signal then. Furious Queen. And friends.
I give a deep
blush.
bow.
So it seems like you have what amounts to a commitment from Rebelus to sort of jump in when the moment is right.
As long as the moment is right, fairly soon.
Indeed, yeah. There is a little bit of time pressure there.
On this, I wouldn't worry.
Yeah,
So,
we do seem to be doing the fourth act rising action.
that seems like it concludes most of your business here. Whence go you all?
My vote is Boar.
Yeah,
I think
100%.
that sounds good. Do we know how to enter it without like reliably?
I don't think you've really spoken about it.
Considered it much?
Yeah, and it's possible that, Leorian, you haven't thought about it explicitly, but you did just have a conversation with your Imperator the other night, so...
Last night, in
presumably-
fact?
Well, yeah, last night.
Last night's another night. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
I tend to treat that phrase as inclusive of anything from the previous night
okay.
to about 4 nights back.
That's reasonable.
Okay.
But,
I said it at 1 to several.
yeah. In any case, maybe if you tried.
Yeah. The very first thing I try is to just take us to Boar. I simply think that very strongly.
Interesting. I'm going to make you roll, but for fun.
Yeah.
Give me a sense.
For Adam's fun, anyway.
Well,
Yeah, sure. Not my fun. That's clear.
It might be your fun too. Hang on. Sense plus empathy, 6 dice.
Okay. That is 2 8s.
So you think this will work, but you have to be further away from things before it will.
Thanks.
Mhm.
All right. I convey this information. I think we need to find a thingless place. Certainly farther from the influence of other imperators would make sense, and maybe just prying eyes.
Yeah, so you all head out of this little 4-gate Lightward community away from Fermata towards the Delta. There is a path here. It's likely that there were villages out here once upon a time, if not big ones, and you follow it until you reach what, Leorian, you feel is an anonymous enough area. No particularly remarkable trees or sort of configurations of land and water, just an anonymous stretch of, well, what is probably the Cyan Mere still, but is starting to progress, into
Okay.
the Delta itself. And then you try again, and sure enough,
Let the record show I repeat the thought, but I do it more fervently in a way that our listeners would recognize as like the third time Gandalf says, "You shall not pass."
Beautiful.
I'm trying to imagine that line delivered with the exact same intensity and body language, but in Leorian's slightly more like, I don't know if it's technically like a California sound, but
No,
like
it is.
vaguer, sort of dialect than Gandalf gives. In any case, it works. You feel the moment of stretching and reaching, and then you feel the connection with your Imperator, and then you feel it broaden, and nothing encompass you and your friends. And as soon as you open your eyes, you are on the windswept, grassy plateau of Bor. And you actually perceive, just on the horizon, a building. Fairly large one at that.
A something in the nothing.
Perhaps we should investigate this something.
I assume then that you head in that direction. There's no sign of anything other than just grass where you are and sort of a sky that is just cloudy enough not to be remarkable for its clearness or its cloudiness.
This sure is a place. Maybe.
Of all the places, this is one.
I am reminded of the concept from the show The Good Place of the medium place.
The medium place is one of the best things in that show.
That's a lovely conceit. Yeah.
And so here you are in a different version of the same idea, heading toward a something in the nothing, as it were. And you draw close quicker than you would think because, well, there's kind of nothing between you and this building. As you become closer, it resolves into what seems to be a fairly middle-of-the-road inn, stuck by itself, away from any road or town, just in the middle of this endless plateau plain. But Lissa, you probably recognize the architecture as being at least somewhat reminiscent of Lurenton. This inn was not in Lurenton, to be fair.
That was going to be my next question.
But it does sort of
it's
kind
postmodern.
of remind you.
Postmodern. Postmodern.
Postmodern.
Postmodern.
Postmodern.
I was going to say post-Lurenton.
Oh.
Too soon, man.
Still too soon.
As you draw close, you see that there is light in the common room, and that there are no particular signs of activity outside of the inn. Who enters first?
Romnet.
Romnet volunteers.
Those goes.
Romnet, you walk in, and this is a common room like dozens of others that you have seen in your life. It is so nondescript as to be painful, but what draws your attention immediately, even before everyone else has entered immediately on your heels, is that the innkeeper, bartender, and only other person in the common room is familiar to you. Somewhat to your surprise, you recognize that the bartender is Urian, Rowena's husband. He looks up when you enter, and his mouth opens just in time for Leorian and Lissa to enter.
I freeze.
I freeze.
have a
I
place
look at
now.
him. I look at her, and then I look back at him. I have been no help.
Responding to you, Romnet, Urian says, I know you. Where do I know you from? I haven't seen anyone in... And then he trails off.
You may recall me from before the end, if you recall the end.
The end? Well, his eyes sort of unfocus.
Your name is Urian. You were married. Are married to my sister.
Oh, I am married, yes. Rowena, darling, we have guests. And you hear footsteps on the stairs. Urian turns towards you, Lissa, and says, "That's right, sister-in-law. Oh, welcome, Lissa. It's been... How long has it been?" And he goes a little vague again. As Rowena comes down the stairs, she's dressed like an innkeeper's wife. She's wearing an apron, trousers, a tunic. her hair is done remarkably fancily, and there's a little bit of jewelry there that would be atypical on an innkeeper's wife. But she comes downstairs and she looks at you with furrowed brow and says, "Lissa, what are you doing here?"
Hi.
Business meeting.
You're wearing my necklace and also an apron.
What's that? Oh, yes. Why wouldn't I be wearing an apron? I run an inn, Lissa. Where have you been?
You don't remember Lurenton?
Of course I do. I mean, we're there now, in a manner of speaking. It's just... She goes a little vague and looks into the middle distance and sort of squints and goes, "It's just further apart than it was."
It's gone.
Well, that's nonsense. If Lurenton was gone,
And I think
why
you
am I
both
here?
died.
They look at each other and then look at you with concern on their faces, and Urian says, "Perhaps you could use a drink."
I will just look up, sort of to a point about 1.5 feet below the ceiling. Dusk, what the hell have you done?
There is no immediate response.
I forget myself and I hug Rowena.
She goes a little stiff in your arms and then uncertainly and cautiously hugs you back and says, "Well, there. I'm sure it's fine. You seem a little confused. Why don't you have a seat? We'll feed you, give you something to drink, and I'm sure you'll feel right as rain."
You're being nice. Are you like, I start like looking her over, expecting to find some like head wound or something.
Where did they put the device?
She's looking at you back in turn with a little bit of consternation and confusion, but she says, "Well, I know we've had our disagreements in the past, but..." And then she sort of trails off and says, "Time escapes me a little bit, but I make an honest trade now as an innkeeper. I thought that you would appreciate that."
Do you scrub dishes too and wipe down countertops yourself? And
She chuckles and says, "Well, certainly not. Urian does that."
I suppose you would. At least some things aren't. Some things haven't changed. I'm going to reach out for whatever connection I felt to her as my anchor and see if it's still solid.
So interestingly, it's still there. It's sort of like it's sort of like when there's a storm and like a bunch of vegetation falls into a drainage ditch. Like it's still there, but it's like you have to push through some interference, to clear the way. For you, it's not hard, but it certainly wasn't there before.
I'm also going to stare at them with the sight and see if I detect anything from...
Interesting. They don't seem like they have been altered or diminished. Let me see. I'm going to have you roll, actually.
Do they respond in any way to my outburst?
I'm not sure that I caught it. What was your outburst?
When I looked up to the 1.5 feet below the ceiling.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, they don't seem to have heard you at all. Their attention seems to have been on Lissa entirely. So let's see. Lissa, give me a sense plus empathy, 2 plus a master die, and there is a minimum height that will succeed here.
Oh, the dice are not happy with me. That's going to be 2 2s.
2 2s. Okay. You
I
It's-
may. Well, no, I have to. No, Lady Luck doesn't help here because I did have a success, but it was not technically a success because it was a master die. How does that work?
No, this is going to be off limits to Lady Luck because you did get a match.
Okay.
But what I will say is that you looking at them through the sight is a little bit like looking at them through a Vaseline covered lens. Like there's a little bit of indistinctness there. They don't seem changed, just maybe muddled a little bit. Like they're having trouble organizing their thoughts.
I'm gonna do something in character, and I'm not sure how this is gonna mechanically work.
Okay. Hit me.
I'm gonna ask Rowena a question in character that only Rowena would know.
Okay.
From our childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I can put the answer privately to you, and you can decide where to go from there.
That sounds like a good solution to me. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out how to formulate the question because I was not prepared for this. Rowena, remember that horrible fight we had at Mima's birthday celebration? What did I find that you told you would keep secret, but didn't?
She purses her lips, looking at you with a little bit of disapproval and maybe a soupçon of annoyance. And she says, well, I don't know why you brought snakes in the first place, but is there water under the bridge? I mean, I think it is. It's been so long, hasn't it?
It has, I suppose. I sit down at the bar, visibly shaken. Literally shaking as well.
Urian slides a glass of something brown very gently towards you. But he doesn't say anything.
I take a huge swig of it and then take a page out of Romnet's book. Look up at the ceiling and go, Dosk, where are you?
No immediate response. Leorian, anything in particular you're doing?
I first sort of whisper to Dosk, though no one would necessarily know this. No, really, what did you do? And then I sort of I think I wander over to the bar. I my default position with these two people is to support Lissa, but I'm used to being petty in doing so. So this stymies me too, albeit in a different way.
Very fair. You saunter over to the bar and Urian asks, would you like anything to drink, sir?
There's no way you could do this, of course, but I had this great cider last night. I wonder if you have any cider.
Oh, certainly we do. What kind of inn would we be without cider? And goes over to a barrel and pours you some cider and brings it back to you. After about 2 beats after your cider is put down, in which Rowena moves over to behind the bar and sort of gives Urian a little pat as she heads back to what you assume is a kitchen behind it. The door opens, and Dosk enters looking much like he did as a mortal, but a little travel-worn. He walks in, looks at Urian, and Urian sort of nods to him and says, welcome, sir, and doesn't try to engage in conversation further, as he walks over to where the three of you are kind of congregated. As he gets close, he sort of nods toward Urian, who takes himself to the back room as well. And Dosk takes a seat next to Leorian, and I'm going to just rule that between Leorian and Lissa. And he sort of sighs and puts his hands flat on the bar and says, glad you could make it. So, they're here. It was that or be dead with all the bedrock being gone and all. I wasn't sure what would happen, but it seems to be a little disorienting to them, I suppose. I hope it's okay.
So technical question though, they're them still.
They just have, I think, kind of hard time accessing specific memories in sequence, and I'm not 100% sure why. I'm pretty new to this whole chancel thing.
But they're dead.
No. See. I was It takes right 100 deaths to make a chancel, and I had a little bit of a head start. And then some of the people who I couldn't save in Lurenton were the remainder, but everybody else, because Lurenton fell and wasn't going to be there anymore anyway, I just, when I scooped up Lurenton into Bor, they're here now. I can't really put them closer together. I guess that's kind of because of my portfolio, but they're here, just spread out a lot. I hope it's okay.
Are they stuck here? Can they leave?
I didn't even think about that. I think so, but I don't know exactly what it would take. I'll work on it, I guess. Sorry, I know it's probably not what you wanted to hear. I think I bit off a little more than I can chew with this whole chancel thing. I just really didn't want to get murdered.
I support you not getting murdered.
I was definitely looking at Romnet when he said that.
Yeah, thanks. I feel like I'm not doing a super good job of this whole being a god thing, honestly. So, sorry.
I mean, the fact that you're apologizing probably means you're not doing a super good job of being God. But the fact that you're apologizing probably makes you morally less dubious than most gods.
I'll take it, honestly. It's a weirdly hard job. You have a lot of power, but boy, your relationship to the mortal world is slippery as hell. Given that the bedrock was collapsing, I thought this was probably the best thing for those left in Lurenton. But I'll admit that it's probably not, super ideal either.
As long as they have autonomy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't try to control them or anything. There's only so much they can do in the middle of literal nowhere, I guess. Hopefully,
they keep spacing out and remember everything, but they're nice. Rowena's nice.
Yeah, you're telling me that she's choosing to be nice. That seems, remarkable.
I don't know a time that she's ever chosen to be nice.
Yeah, well, so, I think what's happening, right, is that her present requires a little bit of customer service, in her own mind, at least, and as she sorts through her past, she may get a little more, standoffish and resentful, because I don't think she's probably super, I don't think this is an aspiration for her, being an innkeeper's wife. And if she figures that out, she might be less happy with it. But it's all pretty new, so I think she's still kind of figuring things out. I mean, you've been in Fermata. You know how being cancelled affects some people, right?
I look at Romnet.
I will make pretty much the same sort of dubious head shake nod thing that I did in person. Because, what's a little bit of body modification within a chancel?
Mhm.
And, maybe let's not go to those lengths here.
Oh, are you saying that out loud?
No.
Okay.
Oh,
Then
I wish you did.
Dusk will not respond directly then.
Yeah, maybe, try to limit your influence over the citizenry, such as it were,
Yeah, well, I certainly...
of the place to, a bit less direct modification than your erstwhile boss did.
Sure. No, I'm not intentionally doing anything, and I'm trying to figure out, kind of the best way to keep it, to be lightheaded. I
Do
think I'm
not
doing
give
an okay job.
my sister gills.
Oh well, no, I'm certainly that's not a danger. Here, I am not sure what might happen if I decided to, but I won't because I don't want that to happen. Hopefully, right, my hope is that if we can kind of bring this to the resolution we want, then everybody gets to go home, but until then, this is kind of the best I can do for them, and I hope that that's good enough.
I hope you gave her sheets with a lot of thread count.
Well, I mean, sort of. The thing around here, right, is that everything has to be minimally perceptible. So she's got sheets that.
So she's literally sleeping on air?
Well, not really, literally, but she's got sheets that will not register one way or the other. Right? Nothing. It's kind of the main thing I can do.
This leads me to the least important question on offer. How does the cider taste?
Like nothing?
It tastes fine. So unremarkable.
So a market improvement. Okay.
Yeah,
gotcha,
so unremarkable that when you have to focus your attention on it to come to a conclusion.
Okay. I nod as though I can confirm what he's saying about the sheets into my cider cup.
Go ahead.
How is Feywa and Toheel?
Right. Well, that was the other thing I was going to say is that there's been some progress there. It appears I guess this is kind of big news, but partway through the process of trying to free Toheel from Zalaban, is so that he could maybe join us. Zalaban seems to have died.
Died?
Yeah. Feywa reports that both Zalaban and Narim are no more. We're not sure exactly what happened, but in the immediate sense, it's helped us with Toheel. We were able to keep Toheel alive and keep Toheel's shard intact. And we should be able to wake him up any time now, though I am a little worried about what could have killed two Imperators in quick succession.
You're something of an expert on the topic.
Sealand, probably.
Yeah, that was Feywa's thought, too. I don't really know enough, kind of...
We had an audience with her.
Oh, I guess it went well since you're all alive.
And since we, murdered one of hers.
Oh. Good job, I guess?
I can't help.
He had murdered our traveling companion.
Oh.
And was going to do the same to us.
I guess I'm glad you were on the job then. With the murders.
No court would convict us, even if there were some court that could convict us. And there seems to be no bad blood, as it were. I, at this point, extract the boon that we got from Celiand. And I don't necessarily mean to stop the conversation, but I place it on the bar in front of me.
As soon as you remove it, Dosk's eyes sort of track it closely to where it rests on the bar, and after a beat, he says, "Well, that is a lot. What is it?"
Power, I think, and a promise.
Huh.
I would be careful.
Huh?
If we suspect that Lady Celian's responsible for the murders of 2 gods, I can't help but wonder if she accomplished it not through outright violence, but through the guise of a gift.
Oh.
We should note at this.
For what it's worth, truth is part of her portfolio, but so is beauty.
What a combination.
So
They were.
there was another gift that went to the big they.
Oh.
Can either of you tell if they remain, unexploded?
I suspect that we would, given what Dusk has said of Tohil, be very aware.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, if something had gone wrong with Mott, the two of you would know. And
But we
possibly
also
also
don't-
be dead.
Yes. We also
That-
don't know
that
if
was
they've done
more what I
anything
was
with
saying.
it.
Right. True.
Definitely. Dosk takes a moment to scrutinize the boon in all of its brilliance, and then slowly reaches a hand out where it rests on the bar and sort of extends his open hand over it. And the light doesn't dim precisely, but ceases to reach so far, and then the whole object just sort of fades. And Dusk closes his hand and goes, "Cool. I was hoping that would work. So it looks like we're trying to arrange a meeting, I guess. Do we want me to be at the same meeting as my old boss? Because that seems risky."
Probably not.
Okay.
He's kind of awfully focused on murdering you.
Honestly, I get it, but I hope not to be murdered.
I would not sanction such a thing, however, my boss is uniquely qualified to override me.
Right. No, that's a good point. So, what do you say we bid adieu to Rowena and Urian and go talk to Feywa for a second? She's still here. She's with Tohil.
I would like to see them both. And I'm a little uncomfortable given there's not a good way of describing encountering a family that is acting abnormally.
Right, yeah. I do apologize for that. I'm hoping they're kind of going to figure it out, but they haven't had much time yet.
I'm sure she'll have words for me when she does figure it out, and I'm sure I will miss this this version of her, but animosity is kind of our thing.
I know how that goes. I think that the best case scenario is that we get this all sorted out, and then she's returned to the mortal realm, much as she ever was, minus maybe one fancy house.
She can build another. Have another built.
Boy, remember how we said our family should never meet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Little did we know they had already more than that.
Oh, don't remind. Well, I say that, but I have more of a perspective there than
Your
I'd
grandfather is
like.
doing as well as he can tolerate.
Well, I guess that's better than the alternative. I'm not sure. I guess we'll find out. In any case, he reaches into one of the very many folds of his clothes and drops an absurd number of coins on the counter. And then looks at Lissa and says, I guess if you want to say any goodbyes for now, this is a good time, but I'll wait outside. I feel kind of guilty, if I'm honest.
I just shake my head once and leave, head out with Dosk.
Mm-hmm. How about the other two?
I down the cider out of politeness and I follow.
Mm-hmm.
I will follow just slightly behind and to the left of Dosk.
By the time the last of you has left the inn, neither Yuri nor Rowena have reappeared, and once you're outside, Dosk sort of turns and takes on something of the brilliance and glory of an imperator, though it is a sort of vacuum version of all of that, and makes a gesture that sort of blurs the landscape around you, and you find yourselves in a sort of sketch of a subterranean room where Toheel, not sketchy at all, is laid upon a somewhat sketchy stone plinth, with Fewa, not sketchy at all, standing next to him. Toheel is positioned as though for a funeral, but you can see him breathing. And Fewa looks up at your collective entrance and says, "Oh, welcome back. I think we may be ready to wake him. Your timing," and she looks at Leorian, "is perfect."
He does that.
I sort of nod nervously. I do.
give him a
I do
thumbs
do
up.
that. I return it.
Dosk gives a somewhat impish grin and says, "You know, I gave that to him.
I made that.
I will laugh and then just sort of look at him like, you realize you're talking about a real person, Dosk. He's a person.
He does look a little shamefaced." Fewa sort of just nods and says, "Well then, I imagine that this will be an interesting conversation," and sort of reaches out and puts her hand on Toheel's head, and Toheel sort of twitches, and then his eyes open and his wings sort of spread out a little bit more naturally than they had been crossed over him before. And he sort of rolls and gets to what is a standing position, looking around somewhat blearily. There is a brief interval of silence, should anyone wish to fill it before Toheel speaks. If not,
welcome back.
Toheel blinks, focuses on Romnet, and says, "Back, yes, well, where am I? And why can't I feel my imperator?"
Respectively, nowhere but in a very official sense, and because your imperator is dead.
Toheel blinks twice. Probably the most human gesture you've ever seen his physical body undertake. And then says,
"To be clear, none of us here did it."
"Who did?"
We don't know, and are fully aware of how unconvincing that sounds.
I suspect, and I believe separately Fewa suspects, that Celiand had a hand in things.
Fewa gives a small nod, and Zalban says, "Celiand."
One of hers, whom we in turn ended, did for, and God, I'm forgetting his name.
Thoralda?
Their name. Thoralda, thank you. One of hers did for Thoralda before we did for him.
"I see." And Toheel sort of looks around a little bit, taking in everything, and says, I suppose my next question is, if my imperator is dead, and Tohil's gaze settles on Dask, why am I alive? Dask looks at Fewa. Fewa looks at Dask and raises an eyebrow. Dask sighs and says, well, you were mostly dead, but we sort of kept you alive here, and then when your imperator kicked the bucket, it sort of cut you loose into our care. And honestly, not to put any pressure on you or anything, but we would love it if you would maybe sign up with one of us, looking over at Fewa. Now that you are imperatorless, if you leave my chancel, you're probably going to just kind of dissolve. I don't know, but that's our best guess. And, if you wanted to sign on, it would add to our portfolio, whichever one of us you signed on with, and then you would be alive still, and we could try to end this whole stupid war. And he gives kind of a wan smile.
To be clear, the end we're all seeking here is not so much any individual imperator winning as destroying the object of the war.
Tohil crosses his wings across him as though going to sleep, but right side up, and regards a lot of you very seriously and says, well, this is a lot to take in.
I know it is, but for what it's worth, you're in good company. And I do a ghost miracle of the forge. The embers briefly dance around me.
Tohil, as usual, does not give very human expressions, but you can watch his pupils dilate. And he sort of murmurs, you've inherited it from Thralda.
I inherited it from their murderer.
I see. Well, it appears that events are moving rapidly. Without Salaban, I am a bit adrift. You say you have a plan for ending this war without a victor. Explain.
Well, we have hopes, to be perfectly open about this. The point of the war is to create an overgod. Well, for the victor to declare themselves an overgod, by being in charge of everything and having all the shards and,
Indeed.
winning by dying last. That worked out swell for the last overgod. We went to the God's Wood and poked about in what likely were some memories, given that we metaphorically went into their skull, the remains of it. And their rage and despair, chiefly at being alone, was part of what drove their sundering.
An interesting discovery. One that sheds light on the conflict.
And since all of this is, to some degree, metaphorical, we're conceiving of the victory as, the object of the war as a throne. And our aim is to destroy the throne, so that there is nothing on which an overgod can sit.
I assume you have a method for this destruction in mind, as you say it is highly immaterial.
Isn't everything?
I am murder.
Oh.
And sacrifice now.
There's a beat, and then Toheel focuses in on you, Ramnet, and says, "Yes, you are, aren't you?"
I apologize.
Well, we can deal with that later, I suppose. Ramnet, would you give me one of your charm plus fascinates for your outlaw charm? That's going to be 4 plus a master die.
Yep. So that is 3 5s becomes 3 7s.
All right.
As if simply, acknowledging the thing I did, but by means of the thing I am, is sufficient to gloss over it.
Toheel regards you blankly for a long beat, and it's kind of typical, right? Because Toheel doesn't, as mellifluous and expressive as his voice is, his face and body language are that of a bat, for the most part.
Oh, is he a bat? I hadn't realized. Yeah.
Just call him Bruce.
And so, he can give an extremely flat, blank stare better than any human ever has. And that's what you're on the receiving end of. And then his voice is, "Yes, I'm sure we will have plenty to discuss once the larger danger has passed. But in the meantime," he sort of turns to look at Dusk, turns to look at Feywa, and says, "I suppose I should choose my affiliation so that I can leave this place without immediately dissolving into the ether. Or do I have it wrong?" And Feywa sort of shakes her head while Dusk shrugs a shoulder and looks apologetic. Toheel sort of regards them both and says, "There's a certain poetry, I suppose, in coming to associate with one's age-old enemy." And he sort of inclines his head toward Feywa and says, "Milady, if you will have me, I think it only fitting that the deep earth join you." His tone is extremely dry. Feywa says, "Of course. It is most appreciated." While none of you are currently using the sight, there is nonetheless a sort of very brief but very blinding flash.
I will flip on the sight as he starts talking just to see how this do.
It blows away your smoke from your void skull for a moment.
It's a good thing you don't have eyes.
Yeah. And it's basically just a sort of forming of a conduit, but it is a very flashy one, so to speak. The conduit is quite wide. Toheel sort of cocks his head and says, "Interesting. I expected to have less aspect to..." Start that over. "I expected to have less access to my domain, but that doesn't seem to be the case." He inclines his head toward Feywa and says, "I trust that your yoke will be light, milady." With a sort of acid deference, and she inclines her head and says, "I have ever been against the enslavement of mortals for the purposes of the divine." And lets it hang there. Dusk looks a little chagrined that he wasn't chosen and says, "So, I guess we should plan our next steps, right?"
I guess we should. Go.
I briefly summarize the situation with Remulus.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So how many are there? How many gods are there?
Feywa looks...
Particularly now that there are 2 less.
Feywa looks thoughtful. Dusk immediately shrugs. Feywa says, "Well, there are at least 7. but it's hard to say for certain. The roster gets confusing after a while. Sometimes, when the war is less of a conflagration, there come to be new ones. For instance, and she looks over at Dosk, were we to leave well enough alone for long enough, a new god would arise to take over parts of Palaran's portfolio that you did not cannibalize. He sort of nods a little bit thoughtfully and says, right, I was wondering I didn't get everything. Huh. And so Feywa looks back at Ramnet and says, so, assume more than 7, but fewer than the hundreds there used to be.
That's the sound of me pulling out my notes. To be like, all right.
Doing some napkin
So-
math here. Yeah.
7, that's...
More than 7, fewer than 100. That narrows it down significantly.
The two here, the
Fewer than hundreds.
The dark.
Hundreds, yes.
two here, the dark, the depths, the sun, or whatever one might say.
Mhm.
Truth, beauty, and what lies behind them. Missing a 7th.
You included Palarin and Feywa?
I mean, the 2 present is Dusk and Feywa.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Palarin is...
Our boss and the Deep is another 2.
Mhm.
Nyx.
Okay, yes,
Nyx.
thank you. That's who I was
The
forgetting.
knight.
And then Sirtha and Sealand. And they know of no others?
They being Dosk and Feywa.
Feywa and Tohil.
Tohil.
Dusk knows what we know.
Sure. Feywa sort of shrugs his shoulder and says, I could list dozens, but I have not encountered any but those in recent years. Tohil looks thoughtful and says, last I was aware, there was another. Theifer, far to the north, still lived some years ago. It's possible that he's been taken off the board, but we've had, in my time as a nobilis, interactions with him.
And what was he the god of?
Tohil looks thoughtful and says, well, I can't say I knew his entire portfolio, but he had something to do with hunting.
If we accrue a large enough union to intimidate the Deep, we could broaden our forces. And if we had a way of contacting Nyx's nobilis, I'm sure we'd find ourselves more allies.
You've had dealings with the knight, then?
Sensation.
Yes.
And more recently, silence.
Interesting. The night is so remote that neither Narim nor Zalaban had ever successfully made contact during my tenure as nobilis.
She fancies herself already the only goddess.
A difficult ally to build a bridge to, then.
Well, her nobilis, I think, would be the allies, to the degree that they are not forced otherwise.
I see. While Tohil trails off there, Romnet, you become aware of a new and novel sensation. You are being prayed to.
Ooh.
Huh.
Turning your attention to the sensation, you can actually hear Creasus Tyr's voice. He says, I suppose you better be good for something, but there's trouble brewing. I thought you might want to know. There's some crackpot who's preaching against you. Here, and I hear tell in Calavan as well.
Thank you for letting me know, Croesus.
You can sense his alarm at getting a reply.
Does this person have a name or an affiliation?
Well, affiliation seems to be himself, but he goes by Umber, Brother Umber. We had brief
priest
dealings
you
with
had.
him.
Yes.
I thought him a fool, but it was easier not to pitch a fit. Now he seems to have gotten to a point where he puts on airs.
Thank you for letting me know.
Yes.
How are things otherwise?
Well, otherwise things are dreadful, as they were when you left, but they were getting better until he showed up and started saying that my wayward family had betrayed the Obsidian God and dragged you and the tall woman along with him.
Is there anything you would like me to pass along to your wayward grandson?
There's a slightly longer than comfortable pause before he comes back, softer, less vitriolic, and says, I suppose you could tell him that he is missed, if you wish to.
Absolutely.
Melusus
I think he will appreciate that.
Melusus feels his absence keenly, and I am not above admitting that it is duller in his absence. Much as we had our differences, the manor is poorer without him. But now that he's moved up in the world, and he sort of regains his vigor a little bit, I suppose you could tell him that there's some sort of apostate raising the rabble against him and you. And it seemed like the sort of thing you'd want to know.
Yes, I do appreciate this.
Well, in that case, I hope you keep it in mind next time you try to drop in on me, but
Indeed.
I'll try my best
Be well.
to blunt the loudmouth's influence in the meantime. But the sooner you see
Thank
to
you.
it, the better. And
Yes.
yes, well, be well yourself. I guess I don't know how to. Bye.
he is alone by the time he says bye,
Sure,
but
sure.
I am laughing.
How do I end the Zoom call?
Well, and there's no tradition of like amen or anything. So
Mhm.
Huh. It may amuse you to know, Dusk, that your grandfather prayed to me.
Amused is, I guess, one of the things.
He also stated that the manor is poorer in your absence, and that Uncle Melly misses you quite dearly.
That's as surprising as it is welcome, I guess.
Also, apparently, there are, I suspect, former associates of mine, preaching against us, the two of us specifically, in Ferret and Calavan.
Oh. Well, that's not great.
I mean, it's an opportunity to reset the narrative.
That's a pretty positive way of looking at it. I guess it matters less to you whether you've got worshippers or not. But if they start peeling away from me, that'll hurt.
Well, on the one hand, that. On the other hand, it could be a way to use the real world as a lever with Mott.
Oh, maybe don't say that name here. But good point. Yeah, we probably shouldn't, I guess, keep you then if there's stuff going on in the real world. Where do you want to be? I can probably put you out wherever you want to go. Probably.
So, gang, where do we want to be?
There it.
Yeah,
Can't
Brother
think.
Umber is likely the most senior of whatever organization there may be.
I'll be your voice in the mortal world. I'll do better than, whatever was going on before. This is a chance to turn things around down there.
Dusk nods affably and kind of claps you on the shoulder and goes, There's no one I'd rather have preaching my word, as it were. I met this Umber guy. I think you're more persuasive than he is.
I take this as an enormous compliment,
Yeah.
not having.
He
I don't
could
think
sound
met Brother Umber.
more certain, but he doesn't sound uncertain.
You may, Leorian, then miss my sotto voce. It would be difficult.
Fewa looks at Tohil and says, "We will try to scout out the remaining competition for vulnerabilities and access to diplomatic overtures in the meantime." And Tohil nods in a surprisingly human gesture and says, "I am at your service, my lady." The slightly
And
icy tone.
if there are nobilis who are less than certain in their duty, devotion, appreciation, what have you, of their boss, may be worth having a chat.
Fewa
need
nods.
only- They need only tap into their fury.
Tohil terrifyingly smiles at that. It is not a comfortable fit on a bat's face.
But it's so cute all the same.
Yeah. Well, and certainly you feel Mavia stir slightly at the sight. But she does not try to take over either.
In which case, I absolutely smile back at Tohil. Enough to let maybe a poke through, maybe a smidge.
Yeah, there's a slight stirring of shadow around you. And there is sort of a beat in which it seems like you're about to leave, and then Dusk goes, "Oh, right. Leorian, a moment," and sort of gestures you off to the side, nowhere super out of sight or anything.
I can't help striding as though, the boss is going to give me a promotion kind of thing.
And Dusk says, "Okay, so things have been really hectic, but I've been meaning to try and do you a little bit of a solid, because I mean you've been extremely on the ball. Do you have the drum
The, I mean, yeah. I hold up the broken drum that I was melancholying over with not too long ago.
Sure. And Dusk says, yeah, I thought so. With you holding it, he does not take it, but he sort of reaches out and places a hand on it. And nothing visual happens, but you can see sort of a little bit of power, you suppose, sort of ripple around it. And when you look again, the drum is repaired. You can still see where the damage was. It's sort of visible mending, to use a term of art. But as Dosk draws his hand away, he says, it isn't much, but it's a gift. And you can hear the capital G. You should be able to borrow time with it. Make good use.
Sure. I decide to pretend I know what this means, and I thank him with a polite bow.
Yeah, he gives you a pat on the shoulder and says, all right, beat feet. We got a lot to do.
Yeah.
Gives you a shaky smile.
I rise from the bow, remember the no titles, and give him a hug.
He returns it seemingly very gratefully, and then sort of shoos you and the other two together and says, all right, let's see how close I can get you. Ferret, here we go. And sort of clasps his hands and closes his eyes and then does nothing for a moment, and then everything is gone for a moment or two. Things bleed back in around the periphery over the course of a couple of seconds, but in such an uneven, stilted flow that it's quite disorienting. And you find yourselves in a common room. It is not peak hours. And Alyssa, you are probably the first one to notice the figures at the table that you are facing. At first, your attention is taken by the figure on the left. A young girl, but as a drowned corpse. She looks up blankly for a moment, and then your attention is drawn by the figure on the right. A slightly younger girl, silent in every way, who looks at you, smiles, and waves pleasantly. You have been dropped off in a common room in Therit that is occupied by Philia and Imbi, among mortals, who are sitting at a table together, drawing. And that's where we'll end our session. So.
You've been waiting on that one a while.
Mm-hmm.
A minute. That concludes the session of Dice Punks, though. Thank you to my players. For those who are listening, we do these recordings months in advance to keep a backlog so that if anything comes up, we don't miss an episode or anything. And it's been a minute, so this has been excellent to get back to. And I hope that my players and our listeners alike have enjoyed the return to form and the energy here. So if you're listening, thank you. We hope that you all join us again next time. If you're hearing this, you probably know where to listen to this. But if you need a refresher, we can be found almost any place one can listen to podcasts, as well as on the wider web at dicepunks.com and on Twitter as @dicepunks. And I think with that, we're ready to say farewell. So say goodbye to the kind folks at home, players.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you're as excited to find out what the hell's about to happen as I am, because I sure don't know.
Thanks for listening, everyone. I also was going to go for something deep and philosophical about forgiving yourself and you're not your emotions, but that was one hell of a cliffhanger.
Yeah, really.
Thanks for listening, folks. And remember, if you wrong somebody, you should apologize for that.
Well said.
I say of a murder.
but he
Just
got
make
better.
amends.
Oh, I'm so sorry that I stabbed you.
No. That I had a fennec fox bite your throat out.
Yeah.
Yes,
There
yes.
isn't like a stock Hallmark card for that one.
Right. Yeah. You have to make your own for that.
With crayons.
We have drawing supplies at hand.
Exactly.
Indeed. I don't often give this little bit of preamble to the ending here, but I had stocked up like 4 possibilities for as the poet once said, and so I'm going to pick the closest approximation, but it doesn't do a great job. I'm a little bit unsatisfied here, so just bear with me, but here we go. As the poet once said, channeling darkness, hemlock for the gods, fading resistance, draining the weakness, penetrating inner light. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in, and stick around through the admin stuff for an alternate toast from Leorian. The songs in this episode, the theme of the Dice Punks and its acoustic version, were written and recorded by the Viscount of Tempo and his element, Drew. Cover art is by Joanne, who has appeared on the podcast now and again. Check out her work around the internet, where she goes by Anything Sows. Site design and graphics for DicePunks.com are by Robin, the player behind Lissa and Mavia, the nobilis of darkness, fury, and sacrifice. Rain and the one-roll engine it runs on were created by Greg Stolze, whose work can be found in a lot of places, but I'll point you toward gregstolze.com. Nobilis was created by Jenna Catherine Moran and can be found alongside much of her other work in and out of tabletop role-playing at afarandsunlessland.wordpress.com. Links to both systems and authors can be found on the Punk Grimoire section of our website, dicepunks.com. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, that's reward enough on its own, but if you're so inclined, you can help us out by rating and reviewing us wherever you listen to us, telling your friends who you think would like us to give us a listen, and even by heading over to our Patreon at patreon.com/dicepunks. We have fun rewards available to backers, including a patron-only Discord and access to the Dice Peaks after show for episodes 1 and following. Regardless, we hope you'll tune in again, and until then, remember, subtlety is for cowards.
I've been thinking about that toast, and it wasn't as good as it could have been, so I've been thinking about a better toast. Here's what I got. Imagine I have some cider, and imagine it's better than the recent examples. All right, to Lissa, who wishes only to delight all, and to Mavia, whose fury is not the sum of her, and to Varric, the dad who showed up, to coin a phrase, and to Romnit, who would rather I not draw attention to him just now, but who warrants praise regardless. And to Fewa and Toheel with all respect, and to Dask with no titles attached, and to Remalus, may he be there for us, and we for him, and all of that, and to the demigods who may yet persuade the night, or else disobey it. May I meet them soon.